groups in Islam. Who am I talking about? Sufis. Where they say that the zahir does not matter, we should just look at the batin. When it came to these types of Sufis, these aren't something new. No, they existed in the time of the Imams. And these are the type of Sufis, for example, Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam told everyone to stay away from. Who used to say that no, all we need to look at is the batin, the zahir doesn't matter. The laws of Islam do not apply, meaning we don't need to pray. The prayer that the Quran is talking about, that is a batini type of prayer. The fasting is a batini type of fast. The hajj is a batini type of hajj. The zakat that needs to be given, all of this, they'll say that this is something batin, this is something esoteric. And the Imams, they say no. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not just look at the individual, but He's looking at the world also. He's not just looking at the nafs, He's looking at the body also. Why? Because He's the creator of the body and the nafs. So then He's going to look at the body and the nafs. So to interpret everything to be esoteric is absolutely wrong. This is why the Imam said to stay away from them. Salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. When it comes to these types of individuals, when it comes to these types of beliefs, some people, they'll attach themselves to these types of beliefs. Why? Because it's easy for them. What do I mean? Let's look at an example for the women, and then I'll get to an example for the men. If an individual says, you know what, hijab is supposed to be done with inside. The hijab is supposed to be just for the heart. There's supposed to be a batini hijab. If a woman hears this, she might say, hey, you know what, this actually makes sense. This makes Islam much easier. I don't need to put a scarf on my head. The scarf needs to be in my heart. It needs to be a batini hijab. They'll be attracted to that. Correct? Why? Because it seems easy for them to follow. Why? It gives them more freedom, if we were to use other words. Islam, religion, what does it do? They have laws, and every type of law that is put, what does it do? It binds an individual. Laws, what do? They're binding. They bind an individual for that individual to follow. And this human being, what does it want to do? It wants to have as little laws as possible to follow. They don't want many laws. They just want one or two maybe. If they could not even have those, if they would choose not to not have those, they wouldn't even want those. And you see that in the society that we live in, that when it comes to some of these laws, a few years ago, there were whole movements about what? About women. There were whole movements about women. You know what? Women are still being oppressed. We shouldn't be oppressed. Even though they have so much freedom, they still feel that they're being oppressed. Correct? And you had so many movements that were degrading women. And I'm sure the youngsters, I'm sure everyone knows what I'm talking about. Where they were actually degrading women. But the women, they thought, no, you know what? We're actually fighting for our rights. It becomes easier. The less laws there are, the easier it is for an individual to live. This is the way this human being thinks. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says no. The less laws there are, that means that the more rights of another individual that you might be taking away from them. So there needs to be laws that protect your rights, and there need to be laws that protect society, someone else's rights. This is why we have these laws. The namaz that we do, it only and only affects us. It doesn't affect anyone else. The fasting that we do, it only and only affects us. It doesn't affect someone else. The hajj that we do, it affects us. It doesn't affect someone else. The zakat that we give. Do you see how some of these faru'ad-din, they're just for the individual, but some others, they're for the whole society? Zakat that we give is not just for the individual. Zakat is for the society. The khums that you give is not just for the individual. It's also for the society. The amr bil ma'ruf that's supposed to be done, it's not just for the individual. It's also for society. Tawalla, tabarra. There's not just for the individual, it's for also the society. So there's some laws that are just specific to the individual, there's some laws that are specific to the society. This is why the Imams, why didn't any of the Imams just go into caves and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Why didn't they do that? Because they were not sent to do that. They were sent to guide mankind. And in order for you to guide mankind, you have to live with mankind. You have to live with them. When they commit a mistake, it becomes your duty to correct that mistake. And how do you go about correcting it? As soon as they make the mistake, you punish them? No. The way that the Imams have taught us is the way they're actually teaching us to live our life. For parents, for example, as soon as a child makes a mistake, is the first thing you do slap them? No? This comes from a child. If a child makes a mistake, is the first thing you do abuse them? The first thing you do hit them? No. Learn this from the Imams. Look at the way the Imams are treating adults. Look at the way the Imams are treating adults. As soon as a person made a mistake, for example, Imam Ali alayhi salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. It was a Shia of Imam Ali alayhi salam. He comes to Imam Ali alayhi salam and he says, Mawla, I've stolen. Can you cut off my fingers? Cut off my fingers. That's the Imam. Imam Ali alayhi salam doesn't say, go bring me a knife, I'm going to cut off your fingers. He doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. He says, Aswad, maybe you're mistaken. Maybe you're mistaken. He goes, no, Mawla, I've stolen. He goes, look, just go back home, think about what you're saying, and then come back to me. He goes, no, Mawla, I've stolen. Now Imam Ali, he says, now that you've said it 3 times that you've stolen, now it becomes wajib for me to cut off your fingers. Imam Ali gave him what? 2 chances. He gave him 2 chances, correct? But Aswad himself, he knew that if he was to be punished for that crime in this world, and that too by the representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he would not be punished for it in the afterlife. He knew that. That's why he tells Imam Ali, Mawla, I want you to do whatever you need to do. If you need to chop off my fingers, chop off my fingers. Imam Ali, he goes, okay, now that you've said it 3 times, that's what needs to happen. That's when he tells his servant to go bring Zulfiqar. He brings it, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he chops off his fingers. And he tells Aswad here, these are your fingers, go outside and bury it. This was an event that happened in Kufa. Go outside the masjid and bury it. Everyone that's gone to ziyarah, they know that in Masjid al-Kufa there's a place that's called Daqatul Qada, meaning that was the place that Amir al-Mu'mineen would sit and he would give his verdicts. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he gives the fingers back to him and he says, go outside and you bury it there. When Aswad was going outside, one of the munafiqeen, one of the Khawarij, they meet him and they look at him and they say, Aswad, what happened? And Aswad, he says, the representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he chopped off my fingers. He cut off my fingers. That's when this munafiq, he starts to laugh and he goes, that's your master, that's who you consider to be master. You consider him to be your Amir, you consider him to be this, you consider him to be that, and this is the way he treats you? That's when Aswad, he gets angry and he says, that's absolutely true. That is Amir al-Mu'mineen. He's the representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the best creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after the Holy Prophet. He is Yasub ad-Din. He is the one who was given the authority on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's behalf to act as his representative. He reads the Fazail of Amir al-Mu'mineen. When he reads the Fazail of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the Khawarij, Ibn Qawwa, he goes into the masjid, he goes, Ya Ali, I don't understand. You chopped off this man's finger. But when I went outside, he's reading your fazail. He's reciting your fazail. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he looks at Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he tells Imam Hassan, oh Hassan, go call him back. Imam Hassan alayhi salam, when he goes out, he sees that Aswad, he's about to bury the fingers. He says to him, Aswad, Amir al-Mu'mineen is calling you again. He wants you to come back with the fingers. When he comes back with the fingers, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he takes his fingers, he takes Aswad's fingers, and he tells them, one by one, put them where they belong. He puts his index finger where it belongs. Amir al-Mu'mineen puts his hand over it, it comes back together. He takes the middle finger, Amir al-Mu'mineen puts his hand over it, it comes back together. One by one, he puts back the fingers together. Now Amir al-Mu'mineen tells Aswad that my duty was to cut off your fingers. I fulfilled my duty. But now this is the rahmat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I attached them back together. My duty was to cut them off. Because my duty is to act as what? The representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But also the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some of us, we look at the imams and we look at just the representatives of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll look at one aspect or one quality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we'll attach that quality to the imam. But no, they represent all the qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful, then his representative also should be merciful. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ghaffar, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who takes revenge quickly, then the representative will also do that. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the patient, then the representative will also be patient. But it's the job of the representative to know when to be patient, to know when to take revenge, to know when to stay silent. That's why you see that in the lives of the imams, Imam Hassan alayhi salam stood up. Imam Hussein alayhi salam stood up. Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he stayed quiet. That's why you see in the life of the Holy Prophet, when he was in Mecca, he was quiet. But when he came to Medina, he used the sword. That's the job of the representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to know when to do what. Do you and I know? No, we don't. No, we don't. But how did, for example, Aswad reach that status? How did he reach that status? What does he do? He goes and he knows for a fact that if I get my punishment from the representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if I get my punishment in this world for a crime that I committed, I will not be punished in that next world. He had that belief within him. That's why he goes to Amir al-Mu'mineen. How many of us, if we were to commit a crime, we'd go and say to the judge, yes, we committed this crime? No. If there is, maybe in this whole group, one or two people. But the majority of us, no, because we know that we're going to get punished. And we're afraid of the punishment. We're afraid of the punishment. These punishments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what do? They absolve us when we get punished. They absolve us of the sin here and now. Here and now. And there was a narration from Amir al-Mu'mineen. They asked about when it came to death. They asked about Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Ali, some people, they die very quickly, meaning that they die in ease. Some people, no, they're having a hard time when they die. Why is that? Amir al-Mu'mineen, he tells them that the angel of death, he appears to individuals in different form based on their amal, based on their belief. If the person had nek amal, if the person had very beautiful amal, then the angel of death will appear to them in a very beautiful state. If the amal of this individual was nothing but bad deeds, nothing but haram, then the angel of death appears to him in a very ugly form. And when he appears to him in a very ugly form, the angel of death takes the soul out. It's not one anymore. For this individual, it's not just one angel, it's a few angels that are telling this person to take your soul out. And because of that, this person's agony. He's in agony. Then they asked the Imam, this also happens to some of the Shias. And I'm sure everyone's aware. Some people, they're on their deathbed, for example, they're on ventilators, but they're on ventilators for a year, 2 years, 3 years. Shias, I'm talking about Shias, forget everyone else, Shias. And then the question arises, why are they suffering like this? Why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala making this person suffer like this? Why is Imam Ali, this person was a matami, this person cried for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. This person went for ziyar. He did all this. She did all this. Why are the Imams? Why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala making this person suffer like this? The Imams, they give a reply to this too. They say that a mu'min suffers in this world. Why? So when they come to the next world, they be absolved and completely clean of every sin. They be completely clean of every sin. Death is the topic, correct? Death is, but the way it comes, the meaning it has, it can have different meanings for different individuals. Death can be a blessing to an individual, or death can be a rat to an individual. Death is a blessing to that individual that lived their life according to the ways of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, according to the ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted them to live. But to that individual that lived their life according to their own whims and desires, death is not something peaceful to them. This is the month of Ramadan. This is the month where we're supposed to have as many neek amal, as many beautiful deeds as we can. This is the month where that struggle is supposed to be complete. Shaitan is chained up. Now the sins that we commit, who do they go on to now? Who will be blamed for it? On the Day of Judgment, verse of the Quran, on the Day of Judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's brought everyone back to life. Shaitan is there. All of mankind is there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked mankind, what was it that made you commit these sins? Mankind, what does it say? It says, Ya Allah, Shaitan made us do this. Shaitan made us do this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He looks at Shaitan, and Shaitan, he says, Ya Allah, you know for a fact that I did not force them to do anything. I did not force them to do anything. All I did was whisper in their ears, but they were already ready to do it. These people, they were already ready to do it. All I did was just whisper in their ears. That was it. So why are they blaming me? I did not hold them by the hands and get them to do it. I did not put a gun to their head and force them to do it. No, all I did was whisper in their ears, but they were already ready to do it. So the intention is already there within this individual, but it's in which nafs, that nafs al-ammara that constantly wants this individual to do bad deeds. And this individual has let this, or he's allowed this nafs al-ammara to take over their soul. And now all shaitan needs to do is whisper in the ear. All he needs to do is just this. And this individual does it. And who are we blaming? Shaitan for our own actions. This is when we were kids, the ones that have brothers, everyone that has brothers or sisters. When you're a kid and you do something bad, in order for you not to get in trouble, what would you do? I'll tell you what I would do. I'd blame my other brothers. I'd blame my other brothers in order that I don't get punished. When we were kids, this is what we would do, right? We blame others for our deficiencies. We blame others for our sins. We blame others for our problems. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no, the problems are not coming from others, the problems are actually coming from within yourself. Sometimes we'll blame Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no, He does not do even an atom's weight of what? Bad to an individual. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not do an atom's weight of evil to an individual. All this evil that comes is through our own hands. But we're not ready to accept, we don't want to take responsibility. We don't want to take responsibility. And that's what Sayyid Khomeini says. You need to start taking responsibility for your own actions. All of the Urafa, if you look at any one of their books that they've written, and they talk about this, the first thing that they tell you is that you need to take responsibility and be held accountable. You need to hold yourself accountable for your actions. And that's what we need to do. Hold ourselves accountable for our actions. Not find ways to get out. Not find individuals that we can blame. The greatest person that we blame is who? Shaitan. Every time something happens, Shaitan made me do it. Shaitan made me do it. No. On the day of judgment, that will not work. On the Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Taqwa itself, it gets translated to mean fear. And this is the translation that I've been using for the last 2 days, to fear. And I talked about yesterday that this fear is not in the sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is some monster who's just ready to kill, monster who's just ready to punish. No, this fear does not come from, that type of definition. This fear comes from the awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This fear is supposed to come from the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just the same way that we fear a mujtahid when we see them. Just the same way that we fear an alim when we see them. It's their taqwa that gives that fear. It's that they have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we fear them. We know that, for example, say Sistani, we know that he's over 90 years old. Are we afraid that he's going to beat us up? No, we're not. We know that, for example, Sheikh Wahid Khurasan, he's 105 years old, and may he live a longer life. Are we afraid that he's somehow going to beat us up? No. But what are we afraid of when we sit in front of them? We're afraid of what? We're afraid of the resilience that they have on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're afraid of the belief that they have on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That belief that they have of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that belief is what puts fear in our hearts from them. But that fear is of awe. That fear is of what? Of how great they are. Not because we think that one of these individuals is capable of beating us up. No. This is the fear that you should have when it comes, this is the taqwa. When we say taqwa and fear, this is the fear that you should have when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as the Imams, Imam Ali alayhi salam, Imam Hassan alayhi salam, Imam Sadiq, Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam, they say what? When it comes to the worship of worshippers, there's 3 types of worshippers. One group worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because they're fearful of His Jahannam. One group worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because they're eyeing His Jannah. They're eyeing the rewards. But no, there's a third group. They fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Or they worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because they've come to the realization that He truly deserves to be worshipped. He truly deserves to be worshipped. They don't care about His Jahannam. They don't care about His Jannah. No. They come to the realization that He truly deserves to be worshipped. And this thought process was with each and every single companion of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. With each and every single companion of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. When Imam Hussein alayhi salam was showing them their place in Jannah, what did some of them say? Ya Hussein, we don't care about Jannah. We're not here for Jannah. We're here for you. We're following you. Why? Because we truly believe that you should be followed. We worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because we truly believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should be worshipped. That's the mentality that we need to put in ourselves. We believe in Imam Zaman. We're waiting for Imam Zaman's appearance so we can follow him. Why? Because we truly believe. We say what? Al-Ajal. Why? We read Dua Nutba. Why? Just so we can gain from the worldly benefits of Imam Zaman coming here? Or no, do we read these du'as? Do we ask for the hastening of the reappearance of Imam Zaman because we truly believe that he needs to lead this world? A lot of individuals, even in the time of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, one of the companions, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad, in terms of knowing an individual's intention, inshallah I have about 2-3 minutes, but in terms of knowing an individual's intention, one of the companions of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he asked the Imam, Yabna Rasulullah, when will the Faraj happen? When will the Faraj happen? And the Imam, he looked at him, he says to him, are you also eyeing the worldly benefits? Are you also eyeing the worldly benefits? What does that mean? That means that there's some Shi'as that exist that only want Imam Zaman alayhi salam to appear. Why? Because of the worldly benefits. Because of the worldly benefits. Until the Shias get together and they say, no, we want Imam Zaman to appear because we need him to appear now. Not because of the wealth that he's going to distribute. No. Because we truly need him. He won't appear. Everything that is happening now with Palestine and everything, it's supposed to happen. It's supposed to happen. This with Palestine is not going to end until the zuhur of Imam Zaman alayhi salam. It's not going to end until the zuhur of Imam Zaman alayhi salam. There's a whole, if you read Sheikh Ali Qurani's book Asr Zuhur, there's a whole section where it says Fitnatul Palestine. The fitna that will happen in Palestine. And he talked, a sermon from Amir al-Mu'minin, he talks about it, that this fitna will not end until the zuhur of Imam Zaman. So what should we do when we see all this? We should pray for the zuhur of Imam Zaman. When we have in our narrations that this will not end until the zuhur of Imam Zaman, should we not all get together and pray for the zuhur of Imam Zaman if we truly want this to end? So we should get together and pray for the zuhur of Imam Zaman. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of Imam Zaman alayhi salam. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us on the path of Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this holy month of Ramadan, His gates of mercy are open to forgive the sins that we commit in this holy month. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive the sins of all of those marhumin, mu'minin, mu'minat that do not have anyone to ask for forgiveness on their behalf. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And please, brothers and sisters, once again, recite Surah Fatiha for the marhumin of those individuals that sponsor tonight's iftar. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم اغفرهم وارحمهم واسكنهم بجوار محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل